All human beings experience anxiety, although some experience it worse than others, which we will go through why that is. Also, anxiety can become a disorder once it impairs or seriously impacts our lives, including how we think, feel, and behave. So, to start you up with some information, I have a really good video that we could watch. So, hopefully,
or a meeting with your boss, when you don't have money to pay the bills in your bank account. But when anxiety goes beyond just a temporary fear or worry, when it starts to impact your life, your work, your relationships, or even your health, that's when it becomes a serious concern. If you have anxiety, you feel it. The list of physical issues sounds like the end of a Cialis ad.
If you're taking anxiety, symptoms may include chest pain, muscle tension, headaches, stomach aches, nausea, heart palpitations, restlessness, dizziness, problems sleeping, hot flashes, chills, a whole bunch of other things, and death. Haha, I'm just kidding about that last one.
Chronic anxiety can be really bad for your long-term health, too. It's been linked to things like heart attacks and suppressed immune system. And that doesn't even address what's going on in your head. Anxiety disorders often have cognitive distortions. Cognitive distortions are irrational thoughts or beliefs about ourselves or the world around us. Basically, it's a fancy word for worries. Examples of this might include things like all or nothing thinking.
If I don't get done everything on my to-do list today, I'm going to be a total failure.
And catastrophizing.
Oh no, I can't believe I made a typo in that email. They must think I'm an idiot.
These cognitive distortions can have serious impacts on behavior as well, affecting a person's day-to-day life, how they interact with friends, or how they manage their job. Without treatment, anxiety symptoms tend to become more severe and frequent over time. But don't fret, help is out there. Contrary to popular belief, an anxiety disorder isn't something you can just snap out of or ignore. It also isn't a sign of personal weakness or someone who's unstable. Anxiety disorders can affect anyone. This stigma against anxiety disorders keeps people from seeking help. Only 1/3 of people suffering from anxiety get treatment, and people who believe that anxiety is a choice are even less likely to get help when they actually need it. So, how do anxiety disorders come about, and who's at risk? Well, there's a popular way of thinking about anxiety called the threshold model. Imagine for a moment a graph with a normal distribution curve. The y-axis is the number of people in your population, and the x-axis is the predisposition to anxiety. In the general American population, about 20% of people have a current anxiety disorder. That means that people whose anxiety level crosses the threshold in this upper 20% will likely experience an anxiety disorder. This threshold can also change based on how you change the population. For example, anxiety seems somewhat hereditary. So, if the population is people who have parents with anxiety disorders, that threshold goes up to 30%. Or if the population is individuals who have experienced a traumatic event, such as mass violence, that threshold goes up to 67%. As you can see, there's a lot of factors that can change the threshold. So, on an individual basis, depending on genetic predisposition, environment, and life experiences, the threshold will change. Okay.
I'm going to end it with that. Basically, I show that video because it kind of reinforces that anxiety is actually quite normal. And when we're going to talk about risk factors, right? So some of the things you already said. I kind of look at, when I talk about mental health or mental illness, I kind of have this framework that's biological, biopsychosocial, right? So we've got the biological, environmental, and social factors. So the first one is biological, genetics. So people can be predisposed. It's kind of like if your family members, so if your parents have anxiety, chances are it might be passed down to genes. But again, with genetics, with the environment, it can turn off or it can also turn on. So for example, if you already are predisposed for anxiety, if your environment is toxic, you've had trauma, there's a pandemic, like just saturated with that thing, then that genetic thing can turn on. Also, there's brain structure. So like that guy said in the video, amygdala is a part of our limbic system involved in the automatic fear response, as well as in the integration of memory and emotion. It's actually the part of your brain that is responsible for that fight, flight, freeze. You know, back in the day, if you were being chased by a bear, right, out in the wild, that amygdala will fire, and it kind of makes sense. However, it becomes a disorder when you're out in your work where there's no bear, but then you kind of see your boss as like a bear, and then your amygdala just fires up and you probably get defensive or fight. So that's when it becomes a problem. Again, the amygdala plays an important part because it enables us to have the ability to discern and feel fear. So another one, environmental. So we've got trauma. Trauma is a big part. There is a research it's called Adverse Childhood Experiences, and they found out that there's a lot of links from trauma to physical conditions, like physical illnesses, and as well as mental health, right? And people overlook that part, but trauma is a big part. Life experiences like losses, whether it's an actual loss of a person that you love from death, car accident, what else? Loss of a home, moving to a different country, to a different city, losing your friends, family from unnatural causes, or separation that can cause losses, loss of a job, transitions, conflict with other people, the pandemic. I mean, we lost a lot of the things that we used to do, right? Lifestyle factors. So that could be poor nutrition, poor coping skills, stressors, right? Constant stress of work, when you're parenting, or just living like your life, your daily chores, that's getting overwhelming. Also learn behaviors from across lifespan. And I said learn behaviors from across lifespan. It's not just through our caregivers when we are younger, although that has a great impact when you're young because our brains are developing when we're young. But also, if you think about, we learn behaviors from school as well, from from our community, from books, from media, right? So those are also learned behaviors from relationships. And then, of course, I have to put media, especially when we talk about COVID. There's a lot of emphasis on watching the news. Like pretty much every day, we hear a lot of the bad stories out there, not just COVID, but other stories that can be negatively saturated. And then last but not least, social factors. So social, as an individual, our own fears or insecurities can also play a big factor. Relationships that we have, if you think about your family, your friends, the community, the whole society, the government, this sort of thing. Having unhealthy relationships or lack of positive support network can contribute to having increased anxiety. Social media can be negative as well. So not just the news, but if you think about it, how we communicate nowadays is through social media. The COVID related anxiety. So like you can see in the picture, we've got memory issues, overthinking, avoidance, sweating, stomach issues, panic attacks, insomnia, rapid heartbeat, headaches, trouble breathing, but it can also manifest in behaviors like constant worrying. So I also call that ruminating, when you're overthinking about thoughts after thoughts after thoughts. Procrastination, trouble concentrating, lack of patience. Everything is just like, it's almost like you're walking on eggshells, right? Needing reassurance can also be a sign of, or a symptom of anxiety. So what does that look like in our pandemic? So you can't think about anything other than the COVID illness. Your anxiety interferes in your daily life. For example, you have a hard time going to work or being in public spaces, even when the risk is very low. Like I hear a lot of my friends say, I can't even go to yoga, even though the actuality is there's 4 people in the big classroom, right? But they still really think about, no, like it's a public space and I can't be there right now. You isolate yourself from others when it isn't necessary. You feel hopeless or angry about the situation, especially with COVID. All I hear is COVID, COVID, COVID. You have a hard time eating or sleeping well because of the rumination, right? Your thoughts don't stop, which affects your mood. And then it could affect your sleeping patterns and your eating patterns. you experience physical symptoms like the things that I've said before, headaches, upset stomach, rapid heartbeat, panic attacks, right? We really feel anxiety in our body. So as a breakout question, the thing about anxiety is, even though I've kind of searched like general symptoms of anxiety, it is very possible that you can experience anxiety in a very unique way. So I encourage you guys, again, it's this is voluntary. If you want to talk in your group, that's great. If you want to just sit back and listen to people, that is also great. But I want to kind of sort of incite some knowledge about what activities or situations may initiate anxious feelings or anxiety, especially when we think about your life today as we speak right now in the pandemic. So I invite you guys to kind of share. Welcome back, everyone. Yeah, since we're kind of in a time constraint, I would otherwise love to hear what the breakout rooms were, but I'm hoping that you guys were able to talk about some stuff about anxiety. But we are going to move on to depression because there's a two-part to this. So now we're going to move to the second part. So depression. What is depression? When normal feelings of being sad, grumpy, or irritable are very intense or last for an extended period of time for more than 2 weeks. So again, it's normal, very normal to feel lonely, feel isolated, right? Especially given the context of what we're doing right now in the pandemic. However, depression as a disorder is more if it's pervasive, like every day there's no change, and it usually lasts for 2 weeks or more than that. So it's not just like, oh, I feel depressed one day, and then as soon as I see someone, I'm happy again or I'm okay. It kind of is like a gray cloud for a long time. So that's technically the depressive disorder, right? So symptoms of depression. So what does that look like in our bodies and in our thoughts? So it could manifest as having a lot of self-critical thoughts when we're ruminating on negative thoughts. So that means even though there's a birthday or something that's, like your kid had a milestone, you really can't stick to the positives. It's very much, you're stuck on those negative thoughts. It can also manifest as slow thinking, difficulty remembering things or making decisions, characterized by sad mood, feelings of worthlessness, guilt, despair, hopelessness, like there's no end to this COVID sort of thing. Low energy and motivation. Doesn't matter what you do, you just can't get out of bed. Not caring about things you used to care about. Withdrawal on things that you used to enjoy. And this is not to be missed with, if you have mobility issues and you used to love skating and you can't anymore, that's not really the case with depression. It's more like you are able to do these things normally, but you can't do it for some reason. You tend to withdraw or socially isolate yourself. Thoughts about harming yourself. It could also manifest in suicidal ideations. It could also manifest as a weight gain, or also the opposite, which you could lose weight as well. And of course, altered sleep patterns where you could have difficulty waking up, or the opposite, where you're sleeping and it's difficult for you to sleep. Now, what are the causes of depression? So just like when we talked about the causes for anxiety, biological is definitely a big part of it. I think it goes for all mental illnesses, right? So in this case, depression can run in the family. So someone with a close relative who has depression may be more likely to experience depression. So in my own practice, I usually ask assessment questions. If they come with depression, I usually ask, well, are there any members in your family that have depression? And surely enough, either their mom or dad or both have depression, right? Or unresolved depression. So even more so, because they don't really learn how to treat them because their parents have not resolved their own depression. Trauma is another big thing. Again, trauma hits pretty much any mental illnesses, whether that's depression, anxiety, or personality disorders, right? That can also develop from trauma, because trauma does come in different forms of abuse and unhealthy patterns of thinking. Pandemic, of course, we're going to shed a light on the pandemic as a loss of control, not doing things that you used to, right? Your daily routine to go out with your friends, that's no longer an option, or at least it's weakened because of the protocols that we have. Life stressors, right? In the pandemic, when everything else is shut down, like financial burden, not being able to connect face to face, if that's you. So yesterday, one of our participants shared just being an extrovert, right? It's really hard because you get your energy, you boost it up through seeing people, and now you can't see people. Lack of sunlight. I'm sure you guys have heard of seasonal affective disorders, which usually turns on during like the fall and winter months when we have a lack of sunlight or vitamin D. And of course, that affects our mood a lot when there's not a lot of sunshine and things like that. Serious medical illnesses. So this is so depression can also be comorbid, which means it can also exist with other mental health illnesses like anxiety and depression, usually kind of go hand in hand. And physical illnesses too. Like, I mean, if you have, a message from your doctor saying like you only have 6 months to live, I mean, that can cause someone to feel a certain loss and eventually can also incite a little bit of that depression. So poor coping skills, like we all know alcohol is an antidepressant, right? But people still use it as a coping skill. Addiction, so that could be substances, abuse, or gambling, or any addictive behavior. Lack of exercise, right? Not staying active. Depression can be linked, I guess depression and anxiety can also be linked in the hormones that we need to get in our body, right? When we talk about our brain structure, we do need some chemicals in the body to keep it going. But if you don't get or if you have a lack of exercise or staying active when your body wants you to move, that can also cause you to feel unmotivated or low energy. Poor nutrition also is a factor there. And of course, I wanted to talk about societal pressure. Even in our society in North America, we are always, our messaging is basically, you got to work, 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 work. Well, the thing about work, it's good for finances. And of course, we do need money to live and things like that. So we can afford the things that we want and the life that we want. However, it can also be a distraction where now you're not focusing on the things that actually matter to you, like family, hobbies, positive things, growth, because you're constantly facing a lot of distractions like work, responsibilities, and of course you cope with it, so that's also part of distraction. And it's very highly emphasized in our culture here, and less self-care. So if you guys were here yesterday, we talked about self-care and how that is just doing what works for you. But if you are constantly bombarded with pressure from your own relationships, from work, from life in general, then there's not a lot of emphasis on focusing on you and what makes you happy and positive. So now we're going to do a breakout question again. So I invite you. This is voluntary. If you want to share, please do. If not, just listen to the participants that do want to share. So this is actually a technique I use when I see people with depression, because depression can easily be internalized, meaning it just sits in your body and people don't see themselves anymore. It's literally like facing like this, where depression is just so big and huge, they can't see past themselves and all the things that make them who they are. So an externalization would be, well, if depression was an object, a color, or a shape, what would it be for you? So in order to tackle depression, as if it's a big block, well, you can't see stuff. So how are we going to deal with that? We want to take it out. And so this is a form of technique that you could do if you are suffering from depression, and really focusing on taking it out of you so that you can manage it. Because if you know what depression is like for you, then you're able to cope with it better and manage it. So again, the question I want to invite you guys to answer is, if depression was an object, color, or shape, or an image, whatever it is, what would it be for you? So again, I am hoping that everyone had a great breakout session. So thank you for those who participated and engaged, even if that means you just listened. Now, more on coping. So Kristen, how do we cope with anxiety and depression during this pandemic? Seriously, just let me know. Well, I was going to show a video, but because of time, if you guys want to search it up, it's on YouTube. It's called 6 Tips to Manage Depression Through COVID. I will encourage you to watch that. Some really good resources in YouTube that is free. However, I have some pictures here, but also I want to talk about a little list here. So the first thing that would help anxiety and depression right now during the pandemic is to stick with a routine. Again, routine is so good for our brain because it tells our brain that there's something that we are in charge of, we're in control of, right? So I have a picture here, things outside my control. We're gonna put the pandemic as a thing outside of our control. We really can't control it. No matter what they say, it seems like it's just growing, and you can't identify it so much. There's so many unknowns about it too, right? So that's outside of our control. When we try to control something that's outside of our control, doesn't that really, it makes you lose your marbles, right? Because it makes me lose my marbles when I can't control something. So what can we control? We have to focus on what's in this inner circle. My attitude. What is my attitude about COVID, right? Am I stopping myself from doing the things I love because of this thing that I can't control? What about my effort? Even if that means just making your bed, going to sleep at the same time every day, sticking to your routine. If you have a workout routine, great, sticking to it. Having proper nutrition, right? That's very important. Staying active. Staying connected as much as you can. This is the time where we need to be creative about how do we stay connected. Luckily, technology has brought us closer to people by phone, online. If you are still into letters, send loved ones letters. I think that's a great tool to still stay connected with people that are far away. And that could be even FaceTiming your family member while watching a movie. One of my clients have done that. And it's pretty cool that they've done that. Even setting up coffee dates, which I have actually just started to do, where I FaceTime a friend, or, if you have Zoom, you can FaceTime a couple of girlfriends or your guy friends, and family members, and just have your own beverage and talk about a topic or play a game, right? Because you can be able to see each other. We really need to be creative and not let COVID beat us to our creativity, because that is something that you have and you can control. Another one is just breathe. When you're feeling, first of all, I encourage you guys to check in with yourself every single day. If that means early in the morning, you ask yourself, how are you feeling today? Acknowledge what you're feeling and know that it will pass. But at the same time, if you just say, I'm fine, I'm fine, I'm fine, you're gonna lose it, because you are not probably fine. You gotta name it to tame it, right? And whenever we feel anxious or sad, and we just gotta remember to breathe. So that could be taking 3 deep breaths. I like the power of 3 because it's just repetitive and you breathe as much as you can. So some deep, slow breaths is really needed. I have this thing where go outdoors, right? I know it's winter. I know the weather can be awful, but even if that means 5 minutes of your time of the day where you just walk outside your street and start walking back and forth, that would still be better than not doing it at all. I also encourage you guys to challenge your thoughts. So a really good way, I even teach kids this, you have to think about your thought as, no judgment. You really can't judge thoughts. Thoughts are thoughts. That doesn't mean that they're true, right? So we really need to ask ourselves, is the thought I'm having right now, is it harmful or helpful? And then you can go down the logical train. Well, why is it harmful? why is it also helpful, right? And make a decision, a rational, balanced decision about that. But if we just believe our thoughts are true, that doesn't make sense, right? We're more logical than that. You are more logical than that. And you do have that knowledge and wisdom, right? To basically have a really good look at your thoughts. Another one, speaking of thoughts, is to reframe our mindset. So, a lot of the times we talk about our problems so much, we don't even talk about when was a time in your life where you've had so much, pardon my French, but so much shit happen in your life and you live through it. How many times do you give yourself credit for the past successes and strengths that you have as a person? We don't give ourselves enough credit for that. May it be going through a separation or going through a hard life when you were a child. Well, did it kill you? No, it didn't. It obviously made you a strong person that you are right now. And we are still here throughout the pandemic. You are still here with me, listening to me chatter, right? You are part of that community too. And so I really encourage you guys to reframe your mindset. When things get dark, where is the light? And you can find that in your own experiences, in your own strengths. Again, going back to eating clean, hydrate yourself, stay active, be healthy. Also, I like this quote. It's get out of your head and get into your heart. We got to think less and feel more, right? We got to get in tune with our feelings because our emotions are actually smart. They tell us if there's something wrong. If we're feeling lonely, maybe that is a good time to check in with one friend or one family member or go to a group like this, right? There's a lot of virtual workshops out there right now. We just have to listen to our emotions so that we know how to deal with it. Again, I hear it all the time. Get over it. Well, how do you get over something that you don't even know what you're feeling? So the best way is to, if we're trying to take a thermometer to see if we have fever and all these symptoms of COVID, I really encourage you guys to do an emotional thermometer and check in with your feelings as well. And last but not least, I think it's very, very important to stay grounded and focus on the positives, like what you're grateful for. Even every day, a lot of people, there's research to back me up on this one. They found that gratitude actually rewires the brain, right? If you have a negative mindset, it kind of rewires it to have a positive mindset. And contrary to popular belief, negative things or negative thoughts and feelings, our brain loves that stuff. That's like candy to our brain. So why are we not giving our brain like the good nutrition it needs, right? So if that means name 3 things that you are grateful for that day and see what happens if you're starting from a place of gratitude every single day. May it be, I am so grateful that I get to do this with you guys. I am so grateful that I am healthy today, right? Even just looking at what you're thankful for today is very important. And so that concludes my presentation today. If you have any questions, I definitely encourage you guys to do that. If you also want to just stay for a little bit, I do have an optional 4-minute guided meditation, which is really good for anxiety and depression. And if you don't have the time, just Google it. It's called 5 Senses Meditation. It brings us back to the present because the thing about anxiety and depression, it likes to think about a lot of these ruminating worries, thoughts, fears, right? It's very fear-based. And so we need to be present. So what's 5 senses? It's literally 5 things that you can see, 4 things that you can feel, 3 things that you can hear, 2 things that you can smell, and 1 thing that you can taste, because it brings us back to our prefrontal cortex, which is our thinking part of our brain, so that we can stay focused on what is present, what we're actually experiencing, and not about, what can happen and what the worst that can happen. So thank you guys for tuning in today and listening to me talk about anxiety and depression. If anyone wants to come forward about questions or do the meditation, let me know. I'm still sticking around for a couple minutes. Other than that, have a great day, and I'll see you guys tomorrow for grief and loss.